Hi, welcome to War Back to the channel. Today I wanted to go over all of the books that I read for the Buzzword challenge this year. If you don't know, the Buzzword challenge is made by Books and Lala. I will link it down below for you guys to check out if you'd like to. I think this is the first year that I've done it all the way through. There have been a couple of attempts in previous years, but this is the first time where I've actually done the whole thing, so go me. But yeah, so we'll just go through each month and talk about all of the fantastic books that I read for this challenge this year. For January, the prompt was There, There, or Theirs, and I read There Are Trans People Here by H. Melt. This is a collection of poetry mostly focusing on trans liberation and trans joy. It was a fantastic little collection. I gave this collection of poetry 4 stars, very much enjoyed it, and it was a great way to start off the Buzzword challenge. The prompt for February was a positive word, and I went with A Beautifully Foolish Endeavour by Hank Green. It's the sequel to An Absolutely Remarkable Thing, I think it's called. I also gave this one 4 stars. It was also fantastic. I really enjoy Hank Green's writing and I hope that he writes more because man, he is a great writer. The story was interesting and super compelling. I loved the characters. I loved how messy and flawed the main character was as well. And overall, this was a fantastic duology, but an especially good conclusion. In March, the challenge was a book with a character's name, and I went with Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands by Heather Fawcett, which I also gave 4 stars to. This one is the sequel to Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, which I absolutely adored. I gave 5 stars to that one. The sequel was fantastic, but just not quite as good as the first book, but I love this main character. I think she's so funny. I love that dry humor that she has. I think it's so good, and the differences between her and the love interest are just so good. They are the perfect Grumpy Sunshine pairing. I just adore those two. They're so fun to read about and I can't wait for the next book. I think it was the plot just didn't quite hit as hard as the first book did for me, but I still loved the characters and the atmosphere of it. For April, the prompt was nature words, and for this one I went with The Grace of Wild Things, also by Heather Fawcett, which I also gave 4 stars to. This one was a super sweet reimagining of Anne of Green Gables, but with magic and witches. I loved this story. It was absolutely adorable. The main character kind of annoyed me because she was a little bit of a bratty kid sometimes, but I loved the found family element of this, all the friendships that bloomed, all that kind of thing. The magic was fantastic. I loved the atmosphere of this like cottage in the woods and the scary witch and all that kind of thing. It was just so much fun. Really enjoyed this one. For May, the prompt was the word every, and for this one I went with Content Warning Everything by Akwaeke and Emezi. This one I gave a 3.5 star to, and I'm not gonna lie, I kind of forget everything about this. I actually forgot that I read this, like, period, but it is a poetry collection, and like, while I do like poetry, I don't read it very often because I have a really hard time talking about it. I have no idea how to rate it or review it, and it doesn't usually stick with me very well, and this is one of those examples where like I literally forgot that I read this book. And I remember pretty much nothing about my feelings on it either, so we're just gonna move on from that one. For June, the prompt was repeating words, and for this one I read Bang Bang Bodhisattva by Aubrey, which I, again, gave 4 stars to. This one was a really cool, like, cyberpunk noir thriller type of thing with the most wonderful found family to it. I love a good found family. Like, that is my shit, and it brings me joy every single time that I read it, especially when it's like an older character with a younger one, which was the case in this book, where the 2 main characters kind of had this like father-daughter relationship going on. It was so sweet and the story was fantastic. I loved the setting and the atmosphere. Anything cyberpunk, and I'm so here for it. I love that dark, gritty, neon city vibe. It is so much fun every single time, and this was such a good example of that. July's prompt was a unit of measurement, and I went with This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal, El-Mohtar, and Max Gladstone. This was so good. Oh my god, it was phenomenal. I gave this book 5 stars, easy. It's one of my new favorites of all time. It was so beautiful. Everybody was right. The hype is real. This was so short but so impactful. It was just stunning to read. Every single page was just gorgeous. The writing was incredible. The story was so interesting and compelling. The setting was beautiful, and the way that the time travel was done was so interesting. I feel like I could read this book over and over again and get something new from it every single time, which I'm definitely planning on reading this again. It was too beautiful to only read it once. I really wish that I could read this book for the first time again. Oh, it was gorgeous. The August prompt was the word like, And for this one, I read Song of Silver, Flame Like Night by Amelie and Zhao. This one I gave a 3.5, maybe a 3-star too. It was good. It was just like kind of fine, you know? I love the setting and the history of the world and the magic and that kind of thing, but I found the characters to be kind of lacking for me personally. The main character was a trope that I just don't personally enjoy. I found her to be kind of annoying, and just in general, especially the relationships were super dramatic and kind of cringy a lot of the times. All of the dialogue felt very over the top, and I just didn't enjoy it as much as I wanted to. For September, the prompt was Senses, and I went with Thirsty Mermaids by Leyh. This is a graphic novel about a bunch of mermaids who cast a spell one night to go to the surface to be able to get super drunk and have a wild night, and in the morning they wake up and realize that they're not able to turn back into mermaids again, and they're like, what do we do? This one was a surprise. I thought it was going to be just a good funny time, and it definitely was, but there was so much more to it than that. There was a lot to do with family and belonging and body dysmorphia. It was surprisingly emotional and beautifully written, and I really enjoyed this one. I love this cast of characters, and again with that found family, it never fails to get me. Yeah, this was surprisingly delightful and I really enjoyed it. It was just beautiful and so simple and just a great time, and I gave it a 4-star. October's prompt was relationships, and for this one I read Sisters of the Snake by Sasha and Serena Nanua. That whole title and name combination is so rough on my stutter. Like multiple S's, the double N, that is a bad time for somebody with a stutter. Every time that I've tried to talk about this book, my stutter goes hard over that title, and it takes me like at least 5 tries to get it in one take. Anyways, this one is also a YA fantasy, which I gave 3.5 stars. It's probably closer to a 3, but I'll leave it at a 3.5 for now. This was fine. Again, I liked the setting and the magic was super cool, like really cool. There was snake magic to it. It was awesome. I liked the history of the world. The plot was interesting. It was just the romance that was so bad for me. Like, oh my god, it was so awkward and cringy. Very YA in the way that I don't like. I love YA fantasy, but not when it's done like this. This was way over the top for me. I just can't get behind characters who are trying to save the world, but they pause that to talk about a boy, and that just really bothers me in any context, but especially when the plot is so interesting and then it's just sidelined because of a cringy romance. You know what I mean? Book 1 was definitely better than book 2, but either way, they both had those same issues. For November, the prompt was the word only, and I read The Only Purple House in Town by Aguirre. I wanted to give this one 5 stars so badly, but I just couldn't do it. So again, the found family got me so hard for this one. I absolutely adored the vast majority of this book. The second that this like grumpy old man character was introduced, I knew I was gonna cry, and I was correct. I cried multiple times. This book is about this woman who just inherits a house and she's broke, so she starts to try and find roommates and ends up collecting a whole bunch of people who are just down on their luck, and they become this beautiful little found family, and it was so sweet. The reason for the lack of 5 stars is because of the romance. The love interest kind of tricks his way into being one of her roommates, despite the fact that he's been basically internet stalking her for years over a tiny interaction they had when they were like 8 years old. And he was just like obsessed with her after that, and it was just really uncomfortable and odd and didn't feel like it was needed, you know? Like I feel like there could have been a much better way to go about them having history than him stalking her online, because even he admits that what he's doing is creepy. He's fully aware of it, and yet he keeps doing it. I just didn't see why that was needed, like at all. It could have been a lot more interesting and less creepy to have a romance in there that didn't involve that. But either way, still a great read. 4 stars, just ignore the romance. And then finally, the December prompt was holiday words, and I went with The Nightmare Before Kissmas by Sara Raasch. This was so good. Oh my god, I loved this book so much. It was adorable. I gave it a 4.5 stars. It had me like squealing and kicking my feet and giggling the whole time. The romance was so good and the friendships were great. The plot was actually really interesting. I found it to be such a well-rounded book that had a lot more to say than just about the romance. There was a lot more to it that made this book super interesting, and this would stand as a book on its own even if it didn't have the romance to it as well, which was surprising to me. I was going into it just for a cute romance and left with a fantastically cute romance and a really good plot and great characters and interesting family dynamics and a whole bunch of other other things that were super well done and interesting and compelling and overall fantastic. So definitely recommend this one. The hype is very real for this one, and I'm so glad that I picked it up. But yeah, so those are the 12 books that I read for the Buzzword challenge this year. I'm so happy that I actually completed a challenge for once. I normally get like halfway through a challenge and then forget about it, which I have done for multiple other challenges for this year, so my bad. But this one I stuck it through and did the whole thing. Was I late for a couple of months? Yes, but that's besides the point. They got done eventually. So but if you did the Buzzword challenge, let me know which book was your favorite of all the ones that you read for it this year. And in the meantime, thanks for watching, and I will catch you guys later on.